Adrian Cole was one of England's most respected young CEOs. His sharpsuits.com voice and strong decisions made him seem untouchable. But deep inside, he lived with a pressure that grew heavier every day. This pressure came from his family name, a name that demanded perfection and traditions he never agreed with. The Coles had old roots, old money, and old expectations. For them, everything in life, including love, had to follow a plan. That's why they had arranged for Adrian to marry Eleanor Sterling, the daughter of another wealthy family. On the outside, Eleanor was glamorous, but she had a cold, proud heart that made Adrian feel like she was more of a business partner than a future wife. The problem was, their engagement announcement was just 1 week away, and the walls were closing in on Adrian. He didn't want Eleanor. He didn't want this forced marriage. He didn't want to spend his life in a house that felt like a cage. His mansion outside London was beautiful but lonely, filled with expensive furniture but lacking any warmth or joy. That same morning, a new maid arrived. Her name was Lily Turner, from a quiet town in Kent. She was humble, soft-spoken, and desperate for the job to support her younger brother in school. Lily entered the mansion with nervous hands, holding a small worn-out bag. Her heart raced as she took in the size of the place, the shiny floors, and the giant windows. The quiet felt almost too rich for her simple life. Adrian first noticed her while he was in the hallway, on a tense phone call with his mother. She was trying to convince him again that marrying Eleanor was the right choice. Adrian's jaw was tight, his voice filled with anger. Lily could hear the frustration even as she kept her eyes down respectfully. After hanging up, Adrian rubbed his forehead and sighed heavily. In that brief moment, Lily felt a wave of sympathy for him. As the morning went on, Lily started cleaning, trying to learn the layout of the huge mansion. Meanwhile, Adrian paced around the house, trapped in a storm of his own thoughts. Time was slipping away. He didn't want to marry Eleanor, but he didn't know how to stop it without destroying his family's reputation. Lily was in the hallway polishing a large antique vase when the sharp click of high heels echoed through the mansion. She turned to see Eleanor Sterling step inside without knocking. Her expensive beige coat was perfectly tailored, her red lipstick flawless, her chin held high as if she owned the place. Adrian's heart dropped when he heard her call his name. He wasn't prepared for her surprise visit, and he couldn't deal with her demanding tone or her endless orders about the engagement party. He looked around, desperately searching for a way out. Lily stood quietly near the stairs, holding her cleaning cloth, her eyes wide as she sensed the immediate tension. Eleanor's heels grew louder as she approached, her voice getting sharper. Panic rose in Adrian's chest, like a fire he couldn't control. He couldn't let Eleanor corner him again. In a moment of pure desperation, Adrian turned and saw Lily. Simple, nervous, and confused. An idea clicked inside him, so sudden he didn't think twice. He stepped forward, grabbed Lily's wrist, gently but firmly, and pulled her toward him. Lily gasped, almost dropping her cloth. Before she could ask a single question, before she could understand what was happening, Adrian leaned down and kissed her. It was quick, unexpected, and shocking. Lily froze completely, her heart slamming against her ribs, her cheeks turning warm. Just then, Eleanor turned the corner and stopped dead. Her eyes widened, her mouth falling open in utter disbelief as she saw Adrian kissing the maid. The room fell silent. Lily stumbled back, her face burning with embarrassment, her mind blank. Adrian stepped protectively in front of her and faced Eleanor with a calmness he didn't feel. Eleanor's voice rose like thunder. "Adrian, what is the meaning of this?" Adrian didn't flinch. He looked her straight in the eye and said, "Eleanor, I can't marry you." Her face turned red with anger as she demanded an explanation. Without hesitation, Adrian replied, "Because I'm already in love with her." Lily's eyes shot up to meet his, filled with shock and fear. She was being dragged into a lie, into his personal war. She never expected the richest man she'd ever met to claim he loved her. Eleanor looked at Lily with disgust. "You're choosing a maid over me?" But Adrian only stepped closer to Lily, signaling his lie was stronger than Eleanor's anger. The argument grew louder. Eleanor shouted that their families would never accept this, that Adrian was humiliating her and ruining everything. Her pride was hurt far more than her heart. She stormed out, slamming the door so loudly that Lily flinched. The moment she left, a heavy silence fell over the room. Lily slowly pulled her hand away from Adrian, her breath short, her face still flushed. "Sir, why did you do that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Adrian exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm sorry, Lily. I needed a way out. You were the only one there." Lily lowered her eyes, confused and overwhelmed. How did a simple cleaning job turn into a fake romance in a matter of seconds? She didn't know if she should stay, run, or cry. Adrian looked at her, his eyes full of guilt and apology, but also something else. Something warm and new he was trying to ignore. Lily subconsciously touched her lips, remembering the kiss, her heart still beating too fast. Adrian saw the small movement, and his own chest tightened in a way he didn't expect. He took a step back to give her space, but he couldn't stop looking at her. She was simple, soft, and gentle, nothing like the women he'd grown up with. Something about her calm presence made his heart feel strange. Lily tried to go back to her cleaning, but her hands were shaking. Adrian said gently, "Lily, I promise you're not in trouble. I'll handle everything. I won't let anything happen to you." She nodded slowly, understanding he meant it. For a moment, they just stood there, looking at each other, both confused by the feelings rising inside them. Adrian didn't know it yet, and Lily definitely didn't either, but that one fake kiss had already changed everything. It had opened a door to trouble, danger, and a love neither of them was ready for. And in the quiet of his lonely mansion, Adrian realized one undeniable truth: his life would never be the same again. Noah barely slept a wink. The memory of the fake kiss haunted him, replaying in an endless loop. He couldn't shake the image of Mia, how she had frozen under his touch, her wide, innocent eyes staring up at him. A strange, unfamiliar feeling was stirring deep inside him, a warmth he tried desperately to ignore. But it was no use. Every time he closed his eyes, every time he blinked, he saw her shocked face, her lips slightly parted in surprise. It was a memory that refused to fade. As morning sunlight streamed through the grand windows of the Hawthorne mansion, Mia walked slowly toward the kitchen, her steps hesitant. Her fingers kept drifting to her lips, touching them gently as if to confirm what had happened. She was lost in a fog of confusion and a deep, unsettling nervousness. She had always imagined her first kiss would be special, a moment of pure magic. Never in her wildest dreams did she think it would be part of a lie, a performance for an audience. All she had ever wanted was a simple, quiet life, free of drama. She didn't want trouble, but it was too late for that. Trouble had already found her. When Noah entered the dining room, he wore a carefully constructed mask of normalcy, determined to act as if nothing had happened. His mother, Mrs. Hawthorne, was already seated at the head of the table, her posture rigid, her expression as cold and hard as marble. "I heard something rather shocking yesterday," she began, her voice dripping with ice. Noah's heart plummeted. He knew this was coming. "Alina came crying to me," she continued, her sharp eyes fixed on her son. At the edge of the room, holding a tray of breakfast dishes, Mia froze where she stood, every muscle in her body tensing. Mrs. Hawthorne finally turned her piercing gaze on Noah. "Is it true?" she demanded. "Is it true that you are in love with the maid?" Noah swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. He could feel Mia's terror from across the room. She almost dropped the tray, its contents rattling with the tremor of her hands. In that split second, Noah saw two paths before him. He could confess the truth, expose the lie, and face the fallout. Or he could double down, continuing the charade to protect them both. His gaze flickered to Mia, her eyes were wide with fear, silently pleading with him. He saw it all in her expression, the fear of losing her job, of being thrown out with nowhere to go. And he felt his own fear, the fear of losing control of his life, of being forced into a marriage he didn't want. He had to make a choice. "Yes," Noah said, his voice firm, defying the frantic beating of his heart. Mrs. Hawthorne let out a sharp gasp, her hand flying to her chest. Mia blinked, her mind reeling in disbelief. Had she heard him correctly? "I'm serious about her," Noah added, his eyes locked on his mother's. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. Mia's heart didn't just beat, it shook. Mrs. Hawthorne shot to her feet, her face a mask of fury. "Absolutely not. A Hawthorne CEO cannot fall for a maid. Think of our family's reputation, our status." But Noah's voice remained surprisingly calm, a steady anchor in the storm his mother was brewing. "I don't care about status, Mother, I care about her." Mia's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever defended her like that before, stood up for her with such conviction. She had spent her life being invisible, and suddenly, she was the center of a battle she never asked to be in. Unable to bear the confrontation, Mrs. Hawthorne stormed out of the dining room, her angry footsteps echoing down the hall. With shaking hands, Mia placed the tray on the sideboard. The porcelain clattered softly. She turned to Noah, her voice barely a whisper. "Sir, why did you say that?" Noah let out a long, slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "To protect both of us," he said, his gaze meeting hers. It was the only way. Mia didn't know what to feel. Relief, fear, gratitude. Her life had been so simple, so predictable. Before she met him, now everything was a chaotic, tangled mess. Noah's expression softened as he looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the vulnerability she tried so hard to hide. "I promise," he said, his voice low and sincere. "I won't let anyone hurt you." And for the first time, in that vast, opulent mansion, where she had always felt like an outsider, Mia felt a flicker of safety, but that feeling scared her even more than the danger. She simply nodded, unable to speak, and quietly left the room. Noah watched her go, a strange tightening in his chest. This was getting more complicated than he had ever imagined. Later that day, the storm returned in the form of Alina. She didn't knock. She barged into Noah's office, her face twisted with rage. "I will not let a common maid steal you from me," she screamed, her voice shrill. Noah remained perfectly calm, leaning back in his chair. There was never anything between us to steal Alina, he stated flatly. Her fists clenched at her sides. You humiliated me. In front of everyone, Noah stood up, his towering presence filling the room. Leave Mia out of this, he warned, his voice turning sharp, losing its earlier calm. A cruel smirk played on Alina's lips. Fine, but don't come crying to me if she gets hurt. Accidents happen. Noah took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. That sounds like a threat. Alina didn't flinch. She leaned in, her voice a poisonous whisper. It's a promise. With a final, chilling smile, she turned and walked out, leaving a trail of venom in her wake. For the first time in a very long time, Noah felt true fear, not for himself. For Mia, he immediately grabbed his phone, his fingers flying across the screen to check the security feeds. He found her. She was in the garden, her back to the camera, methodically picking dried leaves from the rose bushes. The simple, peaceful act was a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside the mansion. He needed to see her, to make sure she was okay. He found her there, just as the camera had shown. Are you okay? He asked, his voice softer than he intended. Mia nodded, but she couldn't hide the worry in her eyes. She had heard Alina's shouting, the echoes of her rage carrying through the thick walls of the house. Is she angry? Mia asked softly, her gaze fixed on the wilting leaves in her hand. Noah hesitated for a fraction of a second. He wanted to shield her from the ugliness, from Alina's threats. I won't let her hurt you, he repeated, his words a solemn vow. Mia looked down, her heart starting to beat a frantic rhythm against her ribs. A sudden gust of wind swept through the garden, blowing a strand of her dark hair across her face. Before he even thought about it, Noah reached out and gently brushed it aside, his fingers momentarily grazing her cheek. Mia froze, that same electric shock from the kiss jolting through her. The world seemed to stop for a second. Noah quickly pulled his hand back as if he'd been burned. Sorry, he trailed off, unable to find the right words, because there were none. Something unplanned, something completely unexpected, was growing between them. It was dangerous, it was complicated. And worst of all, it felt terrifyingly real. Mia took a small step back, feeling breathless, needing to put space between them to clear her head. Noah watched her, his expression a mixture of worry and something deeper, something he couldn't yet name. I'm just your boss, she whispered, more to remind herself than him. The words were meant to be a boundary, a line drawn in the sand. But Noah just shook his head slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. I don't think that's true anymore. Mia stared at him, her heart pounding a deafening rhythm in her ears. The lie they had created was starting to feel like the truth, and she was no longer sure where one ended and the other began. Morning light streamed through the grand windows of the mansion, but for Mia, it brought no warmth. She sat at the dining table, her hands folded tightly in her lap, a bundle of nerves. Her mind was a chaotic loop, replaying the scene from yesterday over and over, that fake kiss. It was meant to be an act, a pretense, but the memory felt startlingly real. She could still feel the press of Adrian's lips on hers, a ghost of a touch that sent shivers down her spine. Just then, Adrian entered the dining room, his movements quiet and measured. Good morning, he said softly, his voice breaking the silence. Mia looked up, startled, her heart leaping into her throat. How was she supposed to act around him now? After what had happened, the familiar lines between boss and maid had blurred into an incomprehensible mess. He must have noticed her hesitation, the way she froze, because a flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. He walked over to the coffee machine and poured himself a cup. Mia's eyes followed the simple action, her gaze fixed on the cup as if it held all the answers. She wondered if he could see her hands trembling, if he could hear the frantic drumming of her heart. He sat down across from her, and the silence that descended was heavy, thick with unspoken thoughts. Mia's mind was a whirlwind. She had never imagined, not in a million years, that her stoic, intimidating boss could make her feel this. This jumble of confusion and fluttering panic. Mia, Adrian began, and his voice was hesitant, uncertain. Her heart skipped a beat, waiting. About yesterday, he continued, his gaze serious. I'm sorry for dragging you into this. Mia's eyes dropped to her lap, a hot blush creeping up her neck. As Adrian looked at her, something shifted in his perception. He no longer saw just a maid, a part of the household staff. He saw her courage in the face of his formidable family, her innate kindness, the unwavering honesty that shone in her eyes. But all Mia felt was the burn of embarrassment. She quickly looked away, anywhere but at him. The silence stretched between them, long and taut. She tried to steady her breathing, to regain some semblance of composure, but her heart refused to cooperate. She simply didn't know how to act. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Adrian's lips. He wanted to ease her discomfort, to make her feel safe. Suddenly, the sharp ring of the doorbell shattered the fragile quiet. Mia jumped, her nerves already frayed. Adrian frowned, a deep line forming between his brows. Who could it be? He muttered, more to himself than to her. Mia, moving on instinct, went to the door and opened it. Standing on the doorstep was Eleanor, a haughty, triumphant smile playing on her lips. "I'm back," she announced, her voice dripping with venom. Adrian's expression hardened instantly. A chill ran down Mia's spine, and she instinctively stepped back, her mind racing. Eleanor strode into the mansion as if she owned it, her eyes locking onto Adrian. "You think you can hide behind a maid?" she demanded, her voice sharp and accusatory. Adrian stood tall, his presence filling the room. "Leave, Eleanor," he said, his tone firm and unwavering. She let out a cruel, mocking laugh. "Or what? You'll kiss her again." Mia froze, the words hitting her like a physical blow. Adrian's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. He had to protect Mia. She didn't deserve this, none of this cruelty and scorn. "I won't let you threaten her," Adrian stated, his voice low and dangerous. Eleanor smirked, her confidence unshaken. "Threaten? She's just a maid. You're supposed to marry me." Adrian took a deliberate step forward, closing the distance between them. "Not anymore," he said, the words clear and final. Mia's heart hammered against her ribs. She watched as Eleanor's face contorted, flushing red with rage. "You'll regret this," she shrieked, her voice echoing through the vast hall. With one last hateful glare, she spun around and stormed out, slamming the heavy door so hard the walls seemed to tremble. In the ringing silence that followed, Mia let out a shaky, shuddering breath. Adrian turned to her, his expression softening as he reached out a hand, though he stopped short of touching her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. She managed a small nod, but her hands were still trembling uncontrollably. "You scared me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. A small reassuring smile touched Adrian's lips. "No one will hurt you here," he said softly, his promise hanging in the air between them. Mia's eyes met his, and in their depths, she saw undeniable honesty. And something else, something deeper, an unspoken emotion that made her breath catch. The rest of the day was cloaked in a quiet tension. Mia tried to lose herself in her chores, scrubbing and polishing with a frantic energy, desperate to push the morning's drama from her mind. But she could feel his eyes on her. From his office, Adrian watched her, unable to focus on his work. He couldn't stop thinking about her, about the confrontation with Eleanor, about the look in Mia's eyes. Every time she moved, a strange tightness constricted his chest. He shook his head, trying to banish the thoughts, to push away the feelings that were taking root inside him. But it was no use. The more he fought it, the stronger it became. He was drawn to her quiet strength, her humility, the gentle spirit that seemed to radiate from her, and he was drawn to the way she looked at him, with a mixture of fear and reluctant curiosity, as if she didn't quite trust him, or perhaps, didn't trust the feelings he stirred within her. Evening came, casting a soft, golden glow over the mansion. Mia found a quiet spot near the garden, sinking onto a bench and gazing up at the star-dusted sky. She felt exhausted, yet a restless energy still hummed beneath her skin. She didn't hear Adrian approach until he was just a few feet away, his presence a quiet, steady warmth in the cool night air. He stood for a moment, simply watching her. "Beautiful evening," he said softly, his voice a low murmur that blended with the sounds of the night. Mia nodded, her gaze remaining on the sky. "I didn't want to disturb you," he continued, sensing her reservation. She finally turned her head, her eyes meeting his in the dim light. "You're not disturbing me," she whispered, the words barely carrying on the breeze. A faint smile touched Adrian's lips. He took a small step closer. "I just want you to feel safe here," he repeated, his voice earnest. Mia's cheeks warmed, and a familiar flutter started in her chest. She didn't understand why his words had such a profound effect on her, why the simple promise of safety from him felt like so much more. And as Adrian looked at her, at the way the moonlight softened her features and made her eyes shine, he finally admitted to himself what he could no longer ignore. He was falling for her. The morning sun streamed through the mansion's windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Mia was in the study, her hands methodically dusting the bookshelves, trying to bring the same order to her racing thoughts, but it was no use. Her mind kept drifting back to Adrian. His words, his protective stance, that unexpected gentleness in his smile. Everything about him was a whirlwind she was caught in. She found herself replaying every moment, every glance, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the morning sun. Suddenly, a voice, soft and low, broke the silence. "Good morning," Mia startled, turning to see Adrian standing in the doorway. He had moved so quietly she hadn't heard him enter. She managed a small nod, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the dustcloth. Being near him made her nervous, but it was a strange, thrilling kind of nervousness, mixed with a happiness she didn't dare name. Adrian's gaze was intent as he watched her. He needed to be sure she was okay, truly safe after everything that had happened. Just as the quiet moment stretched between them, the sharp, demanding ring of the doorbell shattered the peace. Mia jumped, her nerves frayed. Adrian's brow furrowed in annoyance. He moved towards the front hall, his shoulders tense. Mia couldn't help but peek around the doorframe, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach, and there she was. Eleanor, her face a mask of fury. I told you, Eleanor's voice cut through the air, sharp as glass. This isn't over. Adrian's jaw tightened, his body language screaming defiance. Leave Eleanor. Now, but Eleanor just smirked. A cruel twist of her lips and stepped boldly over the threshold, as if she owned the place. She began to walk slowly through the grand foyer, her eyes scanning every detail, a predator in her own hunting ground. Mia shrank back, her heart pounding against her ribs. Eleanor's gaze finally landed on Mia, her eyes filled with scorn. You think a maid can replace me? She demanded, her voice dripping with venom. Adrian's reply was calm, but a steel edge laced his words. No one is replacing you, Eleanor. I'm just not going to marry you. Mia's breath hitched, hearing him say it so decisively, standing up to this woman for her. It sent a jolt right through her. Eleanor's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. You'll regret this, she shrieked, her composure finally cracking. Instinctively, Mia took a small step forward, a primal urge to defend him, to stand with him, but Adrian caught the movement and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of his head. A silent command. Stay back, he murmured, his voice low and firm. Eleanor, however, completely ignored him. Her fury now had a singular target. She glared directly at Mia. You, she spat, her voice thick with contempt. You think you belong here? Mia's eyes widened, a wave of fear washing over her. Before she could even think of a reply, Adrian moved, placing himself squarely in front of her, a human shield. She does belong here, he said, his voice ringing with unshakable conviction. Eleanor's mouth fell open, pure disbelief etched on her face. You defend her. Adrian's gaze locked onto hers, cold and unyielding. Yes, and I will do it again, if I have to. At his words, Mia felt her heart give a powerful thud. A strange, comforting warmth bloomed inside her, chasing away the fear. She didn't understand why his defense of her felt so profound, so deeply personal. It was more than just an employer protecting an employee. It was something else entirely. With a final, frustrated scream, Eleanor spun on her heel and stormed out, slamming the heavy front door so hard the entire mansion seemed to vibrate. Silence descended, thick and heavy, broken only by the sound of their own breathing. Slowly, Mia stepped out from behind Adrian, her body still trembling from the confrontation. Are you okay? He asked, his voice returning to its usual gentle tone. She could only nod, her throat too tight for words. He started to reach out a hand towards her, a comforting gesture, but then pulled it back just as quickly, as if remembering himself. I don't want you to be scared, he said, his voice laced with regret. Mia looked down at the floor, feeling a blush creep up her neck and warm her cheeks. I'm not scared, she whispered, though she knew it was a lie. And Adrian, with his perceptive eyes, saw the truth shimmering in hers. The rest of the day passed in a slow, strange haze. Mia tried to lose herself in her chores, scrubbing floors and polishing silver, but her focus was shot. She could feel Adrian's presence, his gaze following her around the room. Every time she bent to clean, she felt a tension in the air, a pull she couldn't explain. He would force himself to look away, to focus on his work, but her quiet presence filled the vast space, an undeniable magnetic force. She could feel him watching, a prickling on the back of her neck, but she didn't dare look up. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Something was happening between them, a delicate, unspoken thing, growing in the charged silence. As evening fell, the mansion was bathed in the soft, warm glow of lamps. Seeking a moment of peace, Mia slipped out into the garden. The cool night air was a welcome relief. She stood by the roses, breathing in their sweet scent, when she heard a soft footstep on the gravel path behind her. It was Adrian. Beautiful evening, he said, his voice barely disturbing the quiet. Mia nodded, clasping her hands nervously in front of her. It's peaceful, she whispered. He took a careful step closer, ever mindful not to startle her. I want you to feel safe here, he said gently. His words were simple, but they held so much weight. Her eyes met his, and in that moment, a world of unspoken emotion passed between them. A soft breeze whispered through the garden, lifting a stray strand of Mia's hair and brushing it across her cheek. Acting on pure instinct, Adrian reached out to tuck it back. Mia froze, her breath catching in her throat. Her heart didn't just beat, it skipped, stumbled, and then started racing again. The feel of his fingers, so close to her skin, was electric. Realizing what he'd done, Adrian snatched his hand back as if he'd been burned, a flush of embarrassment coloring his neck. Sorry, I didn't mean to, but Mia just shook her head, a faint shy smile touching her lips. It's okay, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Their eyes met again, and the world seemed to fall away. Both of their hearts were pounding a silent, frantic duet in the twilight. The spell was shattered by the sudden crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. A car had pulled up to the front of the mansion. Mia glanced over nervously, her sense of peace evaporating. Adrian's expression immediately darkened, his jaw setting into a hard line. Someone is here, he murmured, his voice low and tense. He turned and started back toward the house, his long strides full of purpose. Cautiously, Mia followed a few steps behind. As they reached the entrance hall, the front door swung open, revealing a stern-looking man in an expensive suit. His eyes were cold as ice. "Good evening, Mr. Cole," the man said, his tone devoid of any warmth. Adrian stiffened, his entire body going rigid. Mia instinctively shrank back, trying to hide behind him, her heart pounding a warning drum against her ribs. The man's lips curved into a chilling smirk as his eyes flickered to her. "We need to talk," he said, his gaze returning to Adrian. "About Eleanor." Adrian's jaw tightened so hard a muscle jumped. He took a protective step back, shielding Mia more fully. "Stay back, Mia," he warned, his voice a low growl. But it was too late. Danger had just walked through the front door, and Mia knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she was standing right in the middle of it. The strange man stood in the doorway, his eyes fixed on Adrian with a chilling coldness. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs, each beat louder than the last. Without a second thought, Adrian stepped in front of me, a protective barrier between me and the intruder. "What do you want?" Adrian's voice was sharp, cutting through the tense air. The man's lips twisted into a smirk. "Eleanor sent me." The name sent a rush of pure fear through my body. I saw Adrian's hands clench into tight fists at his sides. "Tell her to stay away from us." The man just raised an eyebrow, his gaze flicking to me with disdain. "From you or from the maid?" he asked, his tone dripping with mockery. I instinctively took a step back, the insult stinging. A fire ignited in Adrian's eyes. "Don't talk about her like that," he warned, his voice low and dangerous. The man let out a cruel, barking laugh. "You've changed, Adrian. All because of a maid." In a flash, Adrian closed the distance between them, their faces just inches apart. The air crackled with hostility. "Leave." Now the man simply shrugged, a picture of false nonchalance. "Fine. But this isn't over." He turned and walked away with an infuriating confidence, the heavy front door closing behind him with a final thud. Silence descended upon the mansion, heavy and suffocating. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Adrian turned to me, his angry expression immediately softening into concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. I managed a small nod, but I couldn't stop the tears that welled up in my eyes. I turned my head, trying to hide them, but it was too late. He gently placed his hands on my shoulders, making me face him. "Mia, look at me." Slowly, I lifted my gaze to meet his. His eyes were filled with so much worry it made my heart ache. "I'm sorry you're involved in this," he whispered, his voice full of regret. I shook my head, finding my voice. "It's not your fault," I said softly. A sad smile touched his lips, but I made the lie. "I dragged you into it." My own voice trembled as I answered. I wasn't angry, just scared. His expression softened completely. He looked at me with an intensity that made my stomach flutter. "I won't let anything happen to you," he promised. And looking into his eyes, I believed him. I believed every word. The truth was, in this chaotic new world, he was the only one who made me feel safe. He reached up and gently brushed a tear from my cheek. I froze at his touch. His fingers were so warm, so unexpectedly gentle against my skin. "You don't deserve fear," he whispered, his voice a low caress. My heart started beating wildly, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had no idea what to say, lost in the moment. Suddenly, the lights in the grand hall flickered, plunging us into momentary darkness before coming back on. A loud noise, like a car engine, revving and then speeding away, echoed from outside. I jumped, instinctively gripping his sleeve. Adrian's hand immediately found mine, his grip firm and reassuring. "Stay with me," he said, his voice a steady command. I nodded without a second of hesitation. Together, we walked to the large front window, peering out into the night. Just as we reached it, we saw the taillights of a car disappearing down the long driveway. "She's watching us," Adrian said, his voice tight with anger. A chill ran down my spine. This was real. The danger wasn't just a threat, it was right outside the door. Adrian pulled out his phone, his movements sharp and decisive. He called the head of his security team, his voice low but firm, demanding 24-hour protection on the property, effective immediately. I watched him, completely captivated. He was so strong, so in control, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that he wasn't doing this for himself. He was doing it for me. He hung up the phone and turned back to me, his expression serious. "You're not staying alone tonight," he stated, leaving no room for argument. I blinked, confused. "What do you mean? You'll stay in the guest room, the one next to mine." I hesitated, feeling a blush creep up my neck. The thought of sleeping so close to him sent a jolt through me. Is that okay?" I asked softly, my voice barely a whisper. He gave a small, gentle nod. "I want you safe." His voice was so warm, so sincere, that I felt my heart begin to melt. All my reservations dissolved in that moment. I gave a shy nod in return. He led me up the grand staircase and down the quiet, carpeted hall, toward the guest wing. We stopped outside a polished oak door. I turned to him, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Thank you," I whispered, looking up at him. Adrian's gaze softened as he looked down at me. "Mia, I didn't plan any of this." My breath caught in my throat. I knew he wasn't just talking about the security or the threats. "I didn't plan to pull you into a lie," he continued, his voice low and intimate. Without even realizing it, I took a small step closer to him. I could see his chest rise and fall, feel the energy between us shift. His own heartbeat seemed to quicken. "But now," he whispered, leaving the sentence hanging in the air. My eyes were locked with his, unable to look away. "I don't think any part of it feels fake anymore." The words hit me like a wave. My lips parted in surprise, my heart pounding so hard I could feel the pulse in my throat. Adrian leaned in, his movements slow and deliberate, giving me every chance to pull away. But I couldn't. I didn't want to. Our faces were inches apart now, the space between us charged with unspoken feelings. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the moment. And then, he kissed me. It was soft, hesitant at first, then growing in confidence. It was real. It wasn't part of a lie or a performance. It was a kiss full of all the love he had been trying so hard to hide. And in that one perfect moment, I knew I had been hiding it too.